Frankly, the American dream is basically dead for the average person. Like, you do what you're supposed to do. You're a good little boy or girl that does what they were told, and you go to school and you get good grades and you go to college and you take on debt and you do all the things. Where you're told that road leads isn't where it leads in the modern world. We've got kids following a program that is not remotely headed where they think it is based on what we're allowing them to believe because of how it used to be 50 or 100 years ago.
What's going on? We're with our guest on today's podcast, Mr. Jeff Lerner from Entre Institute. What's going on, Jeff?
Oh, man, everything. Glad to be here. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, man. Super excited for this podcast episode. Jeff from the Entre Institute is teaching entrepreneurs all over the country, all over the world about how to be better entrepreneurs, better leaders, better husbands, better leaders in their family, and has written a book, Unlock Your Potential, which was right there, #2 bestseller next to Atomic Habits, I hear. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yes. And I will especially say congratulations are in order to James Clear, because we were a brand new title that, peaked at #2. He's been at the #1 spot on that list for like 4 years straight or something. So good for both of us, I guess.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, I know I got the Kindle version. I was really reading through that the last week. Amazing book, Unlock Your Potential. And I really just want to kind of crack that book open, Unlocking Your Potential. And I want to maybe what gave you the inspiration for this book? Because what are you seeing? I mean, you deal with entrepreneurs from all areas all over the world, and you're obviously seeing something with entrepreneurs and their own journey about, are they able to tap into their potential and why not?
Yeah. So let me sort of take a step back, really be clear about who I serve and how I serve and what I believe in doing so. My basic goal in life is to make entrepreneurship doable, and not just doable, but like the best choice for everyone, or at least for anyone, that, and if you say like, let's slice the world into a few sections, we would say, okay, on the one hand, you've got young people, no attachments, hopefully not even any debt. Maybe they haven't done college yet. And they're like, well, what do I want to do with my life? And it's very easy to counsel that person. Oh, well, before you go get a job and spend the next 50 years trying to save for retirement, trading all your time for someone else's money to, make the value of their stock go up, try your own thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to tell that person that, and maybe they'd try it for a few years and maybe they succeed or maybe they don't. And then, but they always have kind of a backup plan of like, well, I'll just end up getting a job, right? And then on the flip side, you have, let's say, people that are typically in their 50s, maybe 60s, a very small percentage of those people who have enough money in savings and enough industry experience in some industry in the world, and enough of a network and enough of a perspective where it's like, hey, I'm at the point in my career where I think I want to go out on my own. I'm going to take a sabbatical. I'll give myself 2 years to try to start my own thing and become an entrepreneur and do that, right? So those are the two groups to whom you would not say, oh, entrepreneurship sounds like a bad idea. In fact, it sounds like it could be a good thing for you. And then you have everybody in the middle who's like, got a job, probably got a spouse or a partner, got, commitments, maybe got kids, got a mortgage, got a car payment.
And they have no time. They're like,
they have no time. Yeah, their life is already filled to the brim with what isn't working and isn't making them happy and isn't getting them down the road where they want to go. And how is that person, like, the reality is entrepreneurship is probably the best option for most people in the world to have the life they want. But because of the life they have, most people perceive it as too risky. And frankly, they're right, statistically. And so my mission in this world is, because I live a life where, because I was that young person who recognized that I didn't really want what the world was offering me. I didn't want to get a job. I dubbed myself psychologically unemployable from a very young age. I read Ayn Rand in high school, and I was ruined forever on ever submitting to someone else's plan for my life. I wanted to be my own independent, empowered person. I dropped out of high school to pursue my dreams as an artist. I was a jazz musician. That was hard. I started businesses. I intentionally didn't have kids because I didn't want to tether myself to a level of financial responsibility that would make it irresponsible to be so avowedly independent. And so fast forward to the age 39, I was married. I did have kids. I had an amazing marriage. I was in the best shape of my life. I just sold my, fourth successful business and my 15th overall business. I was basically retired at 39 years old. So like I had this life, and it wasn't just that I was financially prosperous. It was like my wife and I did tons of therapy and we built a great marriage. Frankly, out of the ashes of a terrible marriage, we were able to build a great marriage because we got help. And not just we got help because we could afford therapy, but actually like we'd go to therapy for an hour and then we'd get out of therapy. And instead of me being like, okay, babe, I got to get back to work, my boss is going to be wondering where I am, because I was a business owner, I'd be like, hey, why don't we drive around for 2 hours and practice what we just learned, right? And so I had a level of not just financial autonomy, but time autonomy, and even just a sense of like being in control of my own life that ultimately, physically, personally, professionally led me to a place that by 39 years old, I was like, I'm really blessed, and the rest of the world is struggling so much, and they don't have access, or maybe they have access, but they can't realistically justify taking the leap to try entrepreneurship, even though I know what life could look like if they did. Mm-hmm. And so you ask what sparked the book. Honestly, what I just said, that I call it the entrepreneurial dilemma, this idea that entrepreneurship is the unlock for people's quality of life that they want, but because of the life that they have, it's too risky to try it. That is the catalyst for everything that I do now in my life. Because entrepreneurship doesn't just give you a way to make money that is 11 times more likely to make you a millionaire statistically. It also gives you a vehicle in which you can challenge yourself and grow in every single aspect of your life, because the best entrepreneur version of you is actually the best version of you. As a leader, as a value creator, as a team builder, as a communicator, as all the things that create your entire quality of life, not just your bank account.
Obviously, you're inspiring hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people to really look at entrepreneurship, wherever season that they're at, because I can really relate to that young person. I mean, I was exactly like you, where I started my entrepreneurship journey before I was married, before I had the family. I'm 43 now, and I'm trying to ask myself, would I have the guts in order to do that? And would I be able to take the risk to do that during this particular season of my life if I hadn't done it before? What would you say to someone in that season of particular life right now? Maybe someone's just listening and they listen to this particular podcast because they're really interested in business, but they have all of these different things, no time, all these responsibilities, obligations that they have to, take care of.
So first, I mean, everybody's got to make their own decision about what's the prudent choice for their life. But I am going to give some really, really helpful insight for a person that's trying to make that decision or ask that question. And I will say, I mean, so professionally, I'm the founder of Entre Institute, and we've had 275,000 students in a little over 4 years that have bought some sort of course to introduce them to the entrepreneurial option for life and all the things that you can put in place in your life to reduce the risk and increase the probability of success. And that's what Entre is a platform for. It's not like, we're not like Y Combinator, where it's like, oh, if you've got an idea and you want to come, incubate your idea and we'll help you build out your pitch deck and go raise money from angels to seed your thing. Like, that's not what Entre is. Entre is for the millions of people that they don't have an idea. They just have a life that's headed down a path that they can see isn't where they want to go, and it isn't where they were told they would be going. Like, that's what's underneath this, is this great tragedy that I call the broken system, where frankly the American dream is basically dead for the average person. Like, you do what you're supposed to do. You're a good little boy or girl that does what they were told, and you go to school and you get good grades and you go to college and you take on debt and you get a job and you climb the ladder and you get a 30-year mortgage and you get a 2-car garage and you do all the things. And where you are, where you think where you're told that road leads isn't where it leads in the modern world. Now, I mean, this is why every Walmart, you know what the most competitive job at Walmart is?
Greeter.
Because the world is full of 75 and 80-year-olds that are too old to get any other jobs and they're too poor to retire.
Yeah. So
that road is that path is a lie. Like, you are being lied to. We are lying to our kids now And we're doing it implicitly. We're doing it suggestively. We're doing it vaguely and opaquely and in a way that we can deflect the responsibility. But we all know that we've got kids following a program that is not remotely headed where they think it is based on what we're allowing them to believe because of how it used to be 50 or 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. What Entre's trying to do is say, look, I don't care where you are in this world. We're going to show you the alternative path, and we're going to tell you what are the pitfalls of that path that nobody else is telling you, because everybody else in the online entrepreneurial education space is trying to ignore that those pitfalls exist and just convince you that it's going to be fast, it's going to be easy, it's going to be turnkey. You are not the variable in your own success. As long as you buy the right program or subscribe to the right system or use the right business model or follow the right guru, then it'll all be done for you and it'll just magically make money. And then that never pans out. And that's why the whole industry has such a bad reputation. And so what we've done, and this, by the way, I came out of that industry. Like I said, I was a jazz musician. I was broke. I actually injured my wrist. I couldn't even play gigs anymore. Back in 2008, I had attempted to start other brick and mortar, more traditional businesses. I was in a ton of debt. I was getting my second divorce. Like, my life was at a rock bottom. And I discovered the modern digital world of call it modern entrepreneurship. And I was able to turn my life around. And I was in that space for 5 or 6 years, from 2008 to 2012. So I guess 5 years. And I finally left the online business space because I was so disgusted by the failure rate. And not just the failure rate, like, it's okay. I mean, you could say that, like, well, football has the same failure rate because 99.9% of kids that play football don't make the NFL. Like, it's okay if things are statistically improbable and people still go after them. But it was an entire industry that was basically based around pretending these problems and these realities didn't exist. Mm. And it ended up becoming a one-upsmanship game of, like, who can make the hypier claim, the scammier promise, who can trick more people into buying into something that sounds too good to be true because it is, rather than saying, look, if you decide to take the path of entrepreneurship, here are the actual challenges you're going to face, and let's actually help you solve them. And let's lead with the truth. And I have it tattooed on my arm right here. Don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. The truth is, the entrepreneurial path is available to anyone who's willing to develop themselves to be good enough to actually travel it. The world wants you to believe that you're already good enough to get where you want to go, as long as you just follow the rules and conform to the American dream, system path. And so now that lie has been exposed, which is you asked about the book. I wrote that book basically to expose that lie. I knew that I had to get beyond my little world of online business and go out to the mainstream and say, listen, I'm going to explain to you why the system is broken. I'm going to explain to you why the education system, the employment system, and the retirement system are basically this collusion to trick you out of the best years of your life and get you to trade all that time for other people's value and get to the end. And by then it's too late and you have nothing left to do except desperately cling to your 401k because you're out of options. Like, I wanted to call that all out. Yeah. But so let me tell you.
You can apply for Walmart too. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, at least Walmart is the one place. And apparently the two jobs where you can be really old and senile and still get hired are greeter at Walmart and president of the United States. But there's only one opening for that, and it takes your whole life to apply for it. Yeah, I did. And I don't care, because that guy's just a geriatric nightmare that's leading our country into laughable lunacy, but I digress. And I have no strong opinions on that subject. But anyways, you asked about, okay, what advice would I give? That's where this rant started with a question. So let me answer that. I wouldn't say to somebody, hey, you should or should not go try entrepreneurship. I would probably first ask them, is there any path in your life that isn't entrepreneurship that you actually viably see going to where you want to be? 9 out of 10 people, that answer is no. Therefore, de facto, okay, consider entrepreneurship. But then if you do, what are you actually going to be up against? And most people immediately, their minds go to the tactical, right? Okay, well, tell me how it's going to work. What am I going to do? And they think like, oh, well, maybe I struggle with computers, or I don't really know much about marketing, or I don't know, like, I don't like social media and Facebook seems scary and I don't want to go deal with all that. Or right. They immediately go to kind of like the practical aspects, almost like the mechanics. That's not what trips people up. The three things that we have figured out that trip people up, and that Entre is basically built to support people in overcoming. The first is a concept we call positional awareness. Think of all the different things you could do with your time in your life. And let's say 1 is I can go work more hours at my job. 2 is I can go play with my kids. 3 is I can go to the gym. 4 is I can practice my guitar, or what, whatever. 5 is I can read a book, and 6 is I can work on building a business. Mm-hmm. The first 5 pictures are all very clear. You have it. You can see what they look like in your mind. You have some sense of what it looks like to get better at those things. Like with books, we get the tangible reinforcement that like I'm turning pages, I'm making progress, right? Mm-hmm. With the guitar, it's like, oh, well, yesterday I couldn't play that lick, but today it feels a little bit easier. Like we get that tangible sense of progress. Building a business, when the reality of building a business, and this as an entrepreneur, is that net profit is like the lagging indicator of progress. Like it's the last thing that happens when you build a business. There's 150 things you have to do that might take 6 months or might take 6 years before you have all this net profit to show. It's like a hockey stick curve, right?
Yeah.
And so how do people know how they're doing? How do people even know if they're on the right path? How do people know if they're in the right business? How do people, and this is why franchises are so attractive, because everything is laid out step by step, paint by numbers, and people are so excited to have a roadmap of progress that they get into these things where it's like, hey, you're not going to make any money for the first 5 years. Like, let's take owning a McDonald's. You're going to need to, first of all, you already have to have $1 million. I think it's now a $2 million net worth, and you're going to need to borrow $750,000, and you're going to spend the first 5 years paying off the bank loans. But because it's a system, you can at least see the progress, and so you'll stay in the game, holding on for that 6th year when you can make your $100,000, which is about what the average McDonald's owner makes per year in net profit, right? But as soon as you get into modern entrepreneurship, like, oh, I'm going to set up an agency, or I'm going to build a home-based sales business, or I'm going to become an influencer, I'm going to become a content creator, or I'm going to become an affiliate marketer. I'm going to create a Shopify store and do e-commerce. Like there's all these cool business models, but because you don't have a roadmap of progress, people like they short circuit halfway through the process. And the best thing I can compare it to is if you set sail from Portugal, searching for the new world, and the only way you have to know if you're heading in the right direction is looking off the front of the boat, watching for land, but you're not going to see it for 3 months. The odds are sometime in the next 3 months, after day of not seeing land, you're just going to freak out and turn around and go home.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that gets people is positional awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they get so discouraged. You're like, I don't see land.
It's not just their own inner voice. It's the people around them.
Right.
Hey, how do you know this is working? How do you know you're not wasting your time? Hey, I see you dropped out of our bowling league because now you're spending every night working on your home-based business. Like, how's that going? And you don't know what to tell them. What are you going to say? Like, well, it's been 47 days and I don't have any visible signs of progress, but I believe, they're going to laugh at you, right? So other people reinforce the absence of positional awareness and people freak out. The second thing is most people's lives are already filled to the brim with what isn't working. So they're going to, I think of it as like a farm. If you've already got 100% of your fields planted with crops, and the crop yield is not enough to pay the mortgage on the land, and your idea is, okay, I just need to plant more crops. I need a new type of crop. Instead of corn, I'm going to plant soybeans. But there's no empty field.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to plant the soybeans, much less learn how to farm soybeans, much less harvest the soybeans and sell the soybeans, because your tractor and your fields and your labor, it's all tied up with what you're already doing, your corn crop, right? So you've got to actually have a way to create more time and more energy in your life. And to be clear, it's not just time, it's the energy to utilize the new time, because squeezing a couple extra hours in at the end of the day doesn't matter if you're already exhausted.
Yeah.
You've got to re-engineer your whole life to create. It's like taking 100 acres of crops and figuring out how to condense it into 80 acres so that you have 20 fallow acres to plant a new crop and learn a new way to harvest. And it's a whole new type of farming. People get ahead of themselves.
Yeah. And most people don't understand the energy piece, because what they do is they might just say, well, when the kids go to bed or whatever, I'm going to stay up for a couple of hours, and that doesn't work. That's a disaster. And then you start drinking caffeine, your nutrition goes down, they gain a bunch of weight.
Yeah, you're right. It's a downward spiral.
Right.
And your wife is popping in going,
what are you doing?
Honey, when you come into bed, like, and you start feeling this like negative pressure, like my family is suffering and I don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah.
And it's like the tragedy is that if you'll just persevere, like I love the book Think and Grow Rich. It opens with the story of R.U. Darby, who's digging for gold, and he gives up and he sells all his equipment because he had no positional awareness. He had no clue if he was close to the vein or not. And he ends up getting frustrated and selling his equipment. And it turned out he was only 3 feet from gold, from the biggest gold vein in history. And that's like a true story, right?
Yeah.
That's most people throwing in the towel halfway through their online business journey because they're sick of hearing their wife nag at them because they never come to bed anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And they didn't know what to say or how to prove otherwise to themselves or their spouse. And so anyway, that's the second thing, is time and energy. First is positional awareness. Second is time and energy. And the third is actually having the communication skills, the leadership skills, the confidence, the salesmanship, the compelling vision for your life to be able to enroll the people around you in actually being excited about what you're doing and excited about making the sacrifice with you. And part of that is the positional awareness piece, but also it's like your family actually should be excited. If you go to your family and say, hey, listen, I've got two paths here. One is I'm going to work for the next 40 years. I'm going to miss a lot of my kids' stuff. I'm not going to have enough money to retire, but yeah, I don't know. At least our friends won't think we're crazy because we're doing what everybody else does. And the other path is, hey, maybe for the next 5 years, we're going to have to make some eccentric sacrifices, some sacrifices that are not the norm of how people live. Like we might have to stop visiting our neighbors so much and hanging out and doing poker night or game night. We might have to cut back on vacations. We might have to, whatever those sacrifices are going to be. But 10 years from now, we could be retired. We could be multimillionaires. We could have an asset producing passive cash flow. We could have an asset that has $20 million in realizable enterprise value that we can borrow against to fund life insurance policies that pay, endless dividends and secure our family, and we could own real estate and cash flow. And like, there's this whole other picture. If there was equal confidence in both paths, everybody would opt for the second. But because of these other issues, the lack of positional awareness, the lack of available time and energy to make it work, and the lack of ability to enroll the family and the support structure into excitement about the vision and to keep them enrolled over time, even as it gets hard, those are the three things that knock people out of the game and basically keep people trapped inside a system that is draining their life and their time and their energy for someone else's benefit. And honestly, it's a tragedy. And I have decided that I'm going to devote the rest of my life to solving it, or like, honestly, I'll die trying, because like, what the hell else am I going to do? I was retired 5 years ago, at 39, like, and if the first half of my life was about getting myself in a good spot, then the second half of my life is going to be about getting other people in a good spot.
I love that. So, you really just been talking about just this entrepreneurial mindset, tackling the outdated thinking patterns, and having people really just look at their life, where they want to go, and is it worth it in the next few years to sacrifice for that. I want to really talk about, because one of the things I've noticed about you talked about 39, selling your business, but you also were at an extremely great spot in your own life. You were in the best shape of your life. Your family was good. Your marriage was good. You even talk about on some of your other podcasts and shows about how your marriage has amplified your business. You talk about this balanced success, and I don't even want to go into this work-life balance or whatever, but I want you to dig, because I think you have maybe a different perspective on that anyways, about this, your family getting behind you, rooting for you, your marriage amplifying your business. How have you been able to get everything? Because what I've seen is it's this teeter-totter of men. If they're successful in business, they're personal relationships in their family suffers. If they're successful in their family, their business suffers. I want you to talk to the men out there right now about this. What did you see and what have you done in your own life to get this success on both angles?
Yeah, so I'm going to challenge the perspective perhaps that a lot of people have on that question, which is that if it feels like, let's call it zero sum, if it feels like increasing work success means decreasing personal life success and or vice versa, that's not an ontological reality. That's not just a thing that is true about life. Frankly, that's a lack of leadership and enrollment skills. And I would say it's a lack of sufficiently expansive vision for your life, or you might just have crappy partners. There are some men out there who sadly just picked badly. And they don't have a spouse that's going to be excited. Their spouse has too much of their own stuff they haven't dealt with, that they're never going to be excited about a really expansive, compelling vision for their life, because everything in their life is a construct to protect their insecurities and keep their supply for their unmet needs. And they're going to try to enslave their spouse into that. And they're never going to support their spouse into something that isn't that. Like, that is a reality. But honestly, if you don't ask the right questions, you're never going to get the real answers. And so that might be the question, is like, what's really going on here? And it might take years of therapy to unpack that. But like, as opposed to what? As opposed to everybody lying to themselves for 50 years until they die filled with regret? Like, everything is worse than whatever it takes to get to the truth. So that said, assuming that you're in a marriage that has like the fundamental reciprocity and like base level of confidence to support like a compelling vision for a life, then if you're not in that, if you're in that zero sum, like you said, teeter-totter space, you haven't enrolled the people around you in understanding what the point of the sacrifice is, that together you're building something bigger, more impactful for the world, and that everybody's going to be a lot more excited about the older they get. So when you understand the stages of life, and I don't want to veer down like a pure, developmental psychology rabbit hole, but I'll encourage everyone to go Google Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And don't even worry about there's tons of gold in them hills if you want to mine the whole thing. But I encourage you to look at the last two stages. So from 40 to 65, the fundamental conflict that every human being is trying to resolve is called generativity versus stagnation. And it's basically, did I matter? Am I generating and creating value that has meaning in the world? Or have I stagnated where, frankly, it doesn't really matter if I live or die? I really don't have that much value in the grand scheme of things. And that's where the midlife crisis comes from. The midlife crisis is the point where we go from, having life be more about relationships to life being about meaning. And we're going to spend, the average person who lives into their early 80s now is going to spend the majority of their life in the last two stages, which are generativity versus stagnation, which is basically, did I add value to the world? And then finally, it's going to be integrity versus despair, which is, did I truly live in alignment with who I was? Or did I give up who I was for someone else's program, in which case my life ends in despair? And when you understand that the bulk of your life, the largest chunk of your life is going to be spent in those two phases, then when you're younger, or even if you're older, because everybody matriculates through these stages at different times, you start really asking different questions. And I think when you ask that question and you say, hey, the key to life, the key to, if you want to put it in Maslow terms, the key to self-actualization, that pinnacle of human need, or if you want to put it in Tony Robbins terms, the needs of spirit are growth and contribution, and according to Tony Robbins' model of personality. And I've done a lot of psychology study. Like, I could take you through the work of Adler. I could take you through the work of Ellis. I could take you through the work of Viktor Frankl, and all these different psychologists. It all ultimately comes down to, you will spend the majority, the latter stage of your life reckoning with whether or not you meant anything, whether or not you mattered, and whether or not you were in alignment with who you truly were. And all the other things that you think matter more when you're young are just a distraction and a deception. And in that context, you've got to develop the ability to enroll your family into wanting a powerful answer to that question and understanding that together you're in a better position to powerfully create the answer to that question than any of you operating alone. And you go have that conversation with your wife, babe, listen, we're going to, I'm with you for life. And we're going to spend the rest of our years wrestling with these big existential questions. And right now it is easy to be ruled by the tyranny of the urgent, the tyranny of the deadline, and what are we going to pay our mortgage or this or that? You know what? Screw the mortgage. Let's sell the house. If our entire life right now is a whole bunch of sacrifices around paying our mortgage, then honestly, we're living in too big of a house. Mm-hmm. Because most of our life is not going to be wrestling with whether or not we successfully paid our mortgage. It's going to be wrestling with the question of, did our life even fucking matter? Mm. And I want to live a life where the older we get, the more excited we get because of the truth and the profundity of the answer to that question. Will you build that with me? If so, then you got to understand why I'm staying up a couple hours later every night working on the computer. It's not because I'm greedy and I want to pay for my motorcycle, or because I want a toy, or I want to redecorate my man cave. It's because I want a life that doesn't end filled with regret. And I want that for you too. So let's build it together.
No, I love it. Awesome, man. Well, this is an amazing.
But like, in all seriousness, men struggle to have those conversations.
Yeah, no, definitely. As we wrap up this particular podcast, Unlock Your Potential, you've talked about mindset. You've talked about really just getting not only yourself, but your family on this particular vision, and how do you get people on board? How do you lead them well? You've talked about the outdated thinking. Let's just wrap up with this. You've spent the majority of your career, it sounds like, in this online, this digital type of business space. Do you teach most entrepreneurs about this? Obviously, this has to be part of the modern entrepreneurial journey, but talk to us about, what are you seeing right now in the digital space? What are people, gravitating towards right now as we wrap up this show?
So I think the key distinction that I would offer up to people is that being an entrepreneur isn't about having a business. Being an entrepreneur is about having more options than people that aren't. If you're an entrepreneur, it means you've assembled a set of skills and created a mental context, or sort of a map of how the world works, that allows you to navigate differently from everybody else. So it doesn't mean that at some stage in your entrepreneurial journey, like, I'll give you an example. For me, I would say I became an entrepreneur at 16 because I dropped out of high school because I didn't want anything to do with the traditional path at that point. But I didn't actually have my first successful business until I was 29. For 13 years, I was a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. But you know what being a jazz musician allowed me to do? It allowed me to travel to any city in the world that I wanted to and be able to make a living. Mm-hmm. It allowed me to network with incredibly wealthy and successful people, the kind of people who hire jazz musicians to come play their cocktail parties at their house with their entrepreneur friends. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of cool stuff happened for me as a jazz musician that I would consider to be very, very much part of the entrepreneurial life, even though I didn't yet have a successful business. But I had way more options than my friends who were literally owned by their jobs. They couldn't, I'd be like, hey, you want to go to, I was living in Houston, Texas. Hey, you want to go to Austin for the weekend? Well, yeah, but we can't leave until 6:30 on Friday because I'll get in trouble if I try to leave early. So it's about options. And obviously, there's 4 ways you can get paid in this world. You can get paid as an employee, you can get paid as a freelancer, call it contract work. You can get paid as a full-fledged business owner, basically leveraging the efforts of other people in a formal structure that's got a different tax classification, or you can get paid for doing cash flow investing, right? Entrepreneurs, it's about understanding the world well enough to put your program together for yourself at any time based on what you want for your life, rather than having to constantly adapt your life to based on how, the limited set of options you have to make money, which is what most people do. And this is where, I'll share my favorite quote. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. All progress depends on being unreasonable. And so you ask about the digital economy. The digital economy, these digital business models, I referenced a number of them earlier. Those are one cluster of options. There's also, I know you do real estate investing. There's also, like literally, I could probably make a list of 100 things that I could do right now based on my experience to go get somebody to pay me for something. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could go write jingles for TV commercials as a composer. I mean, like, and I'm not saying everybody has to be a musician, but like, that's just one example. I'm like, oh, that created options for me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you could basically drop me anywhere in the world where there's other people and I have some skill I can use to fend for myself as an entrepreneur. And there's particular skills in the context I'm in that have tremendous value, like i.e., since I started Entre, we've done almost $200 million in revenue in 5 years. And I started it on a credit card. Mm-hmm. Again, it's just about creating the skills to have the options. So the digital economy, this is what I would say to people. Yeah, you got to learn those skills, but those aren't the be all end all businesses. The reason Entre tends to start people with those, first of all, we have people take a success DNA, what we call a success DNA quiz, that helps them understand their entrepreneurial archetype and what they might lend themselves to. But also we start there because those are the businesses that have the lowest structural risk because they don't require inventory. They don't require a physical location. They don't require employees. So there's literally no way to go out of business in a digital business for financial reasons. Mm-hmm. As long as you still have an internet connection and probably a cell phone, like technically you're still, and maybe the money to renew your website every month, like you're still in business, right? Mm-hmm. You live to fight another day. But also because they tend to be the ones that you can get the quickest wins, where again, mostly because you're trying to show yourself and other people, hey, this is working, you can at least get maybe some traction in 6 months. Whereas, like I said, a brick and mortar business, it might be more like 5 years. But don't pigeonhole yourself to thinking that the only way to be an entrepreneur in the modern world is on the internet. That's just, that's where we find people and that's where we start people. Mm-hmm.
Well, Jeff, man, I appreciate you so much for being on the podcast today. So Unlock Your Potential. Where's the best place for someone to get the book? And then I want you to just, how do they get started if they're interested at Entre Institute?
Honestly, just go to my YouTube channel, watch any of my videos. I have, I think, close to 1,000 videos on there now. Free training. You get a sense of my style. You get a sense of, philosophically what we stand for in the world. And like, we're trying to change the world by helping individuals change their lives. It's not like, we're not just a place where you go because you like are short-sighted and you want to make more money. We're like, if you really want to transform every aspect of your life by doing the hardest work you've ever done, but actually having a real return on the amount of effort you're doing greater than that which the world provides you with your crappy job that never actually produces a meaningful retirement, then come to Entre. And you can start that at my YouTube channel. It's Jeff Lerner Official. If you want the book, wherever you buy books, Amazon's a good place to go.
Sounds good. We'll make sure we'll put that in our show notes on our YouTube channel as well, on the Iron Deep. And Jeff, it is a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, and wish you the best, buddy.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate you and the audience.